All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to CyberSmart Briefs session 3. Today we're going to be covering password security and management and just talking about general password security, what to do with passwords, and sort of what the evolution of password security has been. Presenting today is me, Joe Jurgens. I'm one of the account managers here at Aberdeen. TJ Horner and Kyle Harritz are going to be here moderating Q&A, and TJ is actually going to be presenting part of this today. Uh, for those of you guys who haven't been here before, this is a monthly webinar that we've been doing. The idea is to just provide some training for end users, just talking about general security. Happens the third Tuesday of every month from about 12 to 12:20. It's roughly going to be 5 to 10 minutes of content, and we leave some time for questions at the end. This event is being recorded for our YouTube page. We actually put all of these recordings up in a playlist that we have easily accessible. So feel free to check out our YouTube page at Aberdeen Consulting, and the playlist is just called CyberSmart Briefs. We do also want your feedback on this, as well as input into other security topics that you guys would like us to cover. So feel free to put questions into the Q&A about any sort of other security topics that you want us to cover. The Q&A is accessed by going to the top right panel of Teams and clicking on Q&A. The questions that you post are anonymous, so feel free to ask whatever, even if you feel like it's a stupid question. There is no such thing as a stupid question. We're happy to answer anything that comes through. And again, just give us some more topics that you would like us to cover, and we'd be happy to discuss those in the future. So, talking about a brief history of passwords, in the 90s, a lot of people had predictable passwords. They were easy to guess, often using pet names, children's names, birthdays were common. People like to reuse their passwords for every account that they have, and passwords were often kept on sticky notes on a monitor or in a notebook near the PC. Some people are still doing that. And threat actors started using methods such as social engineering that were able, and using that, they were able to actually guess people's passwords. Um, Once one account was compromised, threat actors actually had access to multiple accounts due to password spraying, which is where threat actors basically go through and um, once they have a password that they know works, they go through and test it on all sorts of different websites. So, say they get your Facebook password, they're going to test it on other social media platforms or for Microsoft or whatever. So that's why, not reusing passwords. So there was kind of a change that was started implemented by other companies. So they started requiring longer passwords that included a mix of letters, numbers, and symbols. And most companies also block commonly used passwords such as password 123, 123 ABC, 123456, etc., and encouraging the use of multiple passwords just to make sure that you're not getting multiple accounts compromised if one account is compromised from the password spraying. And we want to talk about why this change was implemented, and TJ is actually going to cover the next few slides here to sort of cover what implemented that change or why we view passwords as needing to be longer. TJ?
Thanks, Joe. So this infographic that we have here is courtesy of Hive Systems. It shows the relative time it would take for the current standard of regular consumer hardware, something you could buy, from Amazon, to calculate or guess the passwords of varying lengths and complexities. This graph isn't meant to represent a strict guideline of good or bad, but it's a very useful illustration of how far and how quickly technology has progressed when it comes to this particular type of attack. For a reference point, the current Aberdeen standard for minimum password lengths was in the bottom right of the kind of orange section in the 2022 version of this graph. And that same standard is now at the bottom right of the red category. This infographic also kind of ignores the widespread availability of different cloud services that you can do these same types of calculations, if you have the money to do so. And as a comparison, readily available machine learning systems in AWS, Amazon's cloud service, could calculate this same data 3 to 15 times faster than just a single like consumer desktop could. While pure brute force attacks still occur, most cloud systems have built-in protections that block or lock accounts down if too many unsuccessful logins occur within a set timeline. Configuring those account security settings in a local server environment is an industry best practice and has been part of our standards for well over a decade now. A malicious entity who acquires saved password data and attempts to guess each and every entity in it is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's the very first form of a purely digital breach to exist. Because of that, most modern computer systems employ additional security measures designed to protect stored password information in ways that can't be decoded easily or even at all. An example of this in practice is the recent theft of LastPass password vault files that were secured in such a way that can't easily be broken by using these kind of brute force cracking methods, assuming you have a sufficiently strong master password. And this alternative slide, also from Hive Systems, shows the estimated capabilities of advanced AI language models like ChatGPT. And these systems are highly computational dependent. They have massive hardware behind them to do all these calculations to, do the AI models that they're operating under. And they follow kind of the estimated and published calculation capabilities of that hardware infrastructure, in this case specifically to power ChatGPT, which is the same platform Microsoft recently invested a reported $10 billion into to further their own AI strategies. Hardware platforms like this are not available to the general public and are almost certainly not being used to guess your password. So this isn't necessarily a strict warning, but you can see in this example, a high quality 12-character password went from a 226-year timeline to an 8-month timeline. So the massive amount of computational hardware that's out there is certainly an interesting data point. So some of the password policies are how you can protect yourself. The first rule is never reuse passwords. Joe mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that is the number one rule. Never reuse passwords. Rule 2, don't use predictable passwords. Anything you can, easily guess, a single word, that kind of thing. Packers 1, 2, 3. Those are no longer sufficient passwords. From the Have It Been Pwned website that we've linked several times, there are 12 billion known compromised accounts out there just from what they've calculated and recorded on their website. That's a ton. That's a huge, huge number. Rule number 3, never use passwords. We'll come back to that. That's an important rule. The fourth item there, think passphrases, not passwords. And we have some references in the next slide that will help with that. But if you can think of a short phrase or even a full sentence to secure that particular entity, 1, it's easier to remember. And 2, they're exceptionally long and can include things like numbers, punctuation, etc. Literally a sentence with proper punctuation is still a fully functional password in almost every system you can think of. A note in there too, our current minimum standard with the big red asterisk there is a 10-character complex password. And a complex password is a mixture of upper and lowercase alphanumeric characters, at least in one number and at least one symbol, period, exclamation point, $, things like that. The other tip there, using a password management tool, obviously having unique passwords for everything is a lot to remember, and there's no reason that you should have to. And password management tools such as LastPass or Bitwarden or 1Password and all the other ones that you may have seen are good, secure methods, to store that information and have it readily accessible. And then lastly, probably the most important rule is never use passwords. On this slide, we kind of threw in some helpful information, and obviously these links are great reference points to bookmark. The very first one there is a password and passphrase generator powered by Bitwarden, which is an open source password management tool. I have an example in that image to the right there of kind of what that means. You can select, like in this case, a passphrase that's 3 words, and then say, hey, use capital letters, include a number. And in this case, the word separator functions as your special character. So that is a fully compliant password that is pretty easy to remember once you use it once or twice. And it doesn't require you to think of weird combinations of letters and numbers that are difficult to remember for people. Common words will be much easier. And a password of this length is significantly harder to guess or to crack than something that is 10 or 12 characters long. Obviously, the link to LastPass.com there, LastPass Enterprise is a tool that we support for our customers, in their environments at work, but there's also home versions of that, or a family version that you can use amongst other ones. But it remains an industry leader despite some of the recent troubles, and is a quality tool that can be used to help you manage your stored passwords. And lastly, the Have It Been Pwned website is a great resource. It's been around for a long time, that will let you check any kind of emails or passwords that you have fear that they might be compromised, amongst the database of all the breaches and data points that they've collected over the years, to kind of tell you, yeah, hey, that password that you use on Facebook was in a breach, and then quickly obviously go and change that, or give you a quick sampling of all the different places that your email account may have been used or appeared in data breaches across the internet. It's a great resource to use. Obviously, don't put any current passwords you're using into their checker. That would make them invalid immediately because you just shared them. But it is a good resource as you change things to see where that might have been.